Oh, and I also did numbers and deviation, all that too. So that one, anybody asked? I think that one is environmental.
Right. Good afternoon, commissioners. Welcome back. Back to you, Chair Harrington.
Okay, great. So we're getting back to. We're getting back to our work session.
Yes.
We do have a busy afternoon of topics because we need the agenda to accommodate one of our earlier morning topics. So at this juncture, we're going to pick up with topic 3. And what order do you prefer for the remaining?
After topic 3, we would go back to reapportionment and then just stay with the flow there.
3 and 4 and 5. Okay, terrific. And I've moved over here simply because of the COVID exposure and wearing a mask, and I'm just being judicious.
Thank you.
Enjoy the elbow room. All righty, without further ado, we'll turn it over to our experts.
Great, thank you, Chair Harrington and Board. For the record, I'm Marnie Kyle. I'm one of the ACAs. I don't even know what I am. One of the ACAs. It's been a busy morning. So I have a lot of esteemed colleagues behind us. There's only about 3 of us that are going to talk, but just to kind of reduce, but I just want to make sure that you know we have a lot of subject matter experts if you have questions. So let's see if I have this. Oh, it worked. All right. So what we're planning for today is to provide you an overview of aid and assist so that everybody's kind of on the same page about what it is and how it works. We'll also provide an overview of Judge Mossman's orders and how that has impacted the program. We'll talk a bit about roles and responsibilities, challenges, and where we are, work in progress, and then some recommendations for your board's consideration. So that's the plan for today. So I do want to acknowledge that we have a great team. Chance Woolley, who's sitting here next to me, is a mental health supervisor, and he supervises the forensic program. And he is not just a subject matter expert for us, but for the state. They turn to Chance. And Nick, as you know, also our behavioral health division manager is here. He's part of the team. Kevin Barton, Pat Garrett, our sheriff. Brad Anderson, he's here also in case you have any questions about his work, both with the legislature and with the committee that's been working on this. Tom Powers in government relations, myself, and Erin Calvert, and she would be here as part of this today, but she is enjoying some time off, well-deserved time off. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Chance and let you get started hearing from our subject matter expert.
So you know, our Director of Community Corrections, Steve Berger, is here as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So we
Perfect.
All the,
Sorry.
oh, you're back to the door,
Yeah.
because I alerted you.
So I'm going to step away because we will have at 1.3 subject matter experts at the table at once. So.
Well, if you need another chair, there you go.
Yes.
Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Chair Harrington. Thank you, commissioners. Again, for the record, I'm Chance Woolley. I supervise forensic behavioral health services at Washington County. And that's that intersection between the courts and community behavioral health. It includes services for people who are found guilty except for insanity of crimes, people who are trying to divert from jail. It includes having a staff person that we share with the city of Beaverton that's embedded in their court, and also people providing aid and assist services, which brings me here today. And I was asked to give a brief history of aid and assist. We call aid and assist 370 because it's part of the Oregon Criminal Statute 161. So it's 161.370. So for us, aid and assist and 370 mean the same thing. Although the statute, that part of the criminal code goes back many, many decades, there have been 4 fairly recent watershed moments that have brought us to this point in time, which is the Mossman decision. The first of those was in 2002, when there was a lawsuit filed against the state of Oregon at the federal level. The plaintiff was the Oregon Advocacy Center, now referred to as Disability Rights Oregon, or DRO. They sued the superintendent of the state hospital, 2002. That was Mink, the superintendent. That was the Mink decision that made it clear that the state hospital, when ordered by the criminal court to serve people who have been found unable to aid and assist, so they're because of a mental disorder or defect, they are unable to work with an attorney to understand the criminal proceedings, that within 7 days of that order, the state hospital, the superintendent, had to receive those people. That was in 2002. In 2013, 13 years later, mental health authority directors or managers from around the state were getting calls from the Oregon Health Authority saying the sky is falling, that we are seeing an increase in the number of people being criminally committed to the state hospital, and we're overwhelmed. That was in 2013. And they had asked mental health authorities, including ours, to put forth a plan to help divert people from the state hospital. We had 17 people in the state hospital under 370 in 2013. And based on that, we said we could help if we had enough money for 2 staff. They gave us the funds. And every year since 2013, the number of people being sent to the state hospital under criminal commitment has been going way up, up, and up. And over those years, we've been asking OHA for increased funding. Our funding was relatively flat up until a few years ago. 2002 was the Mink decision. You got to admit people within 7 days. 2013 was when the state recognized that they were being overwhelmed with criminal commitments. 2019, another suit was filed in the federal court claiming that the state hospital was not adhering to the Mink order. They were taking too long, well beyond 7 days. And the court did determine that they were out of compliance. They gave OHA 90 days to fix it. That was in 2019. And they did. Within 90 days, they were back in compliance, and then the pandemic hit. The state hospital was having a difficult time staying fully staffed. The federal court brought OHA and Disability Rights Oregon together and said, what are we going to do? And in 2021, they reached a settlement agreement. 2021, so 2002, 2013, 2019, that led to a settlement agreement. And you can put that in the parking lot for just a second. Aid and assist services involves, that part of the statute involves several moving parts, and I'll refer to them as gears, moving gears that are all interdependent. One of those is aid and assist services provided by the county. It's in statute, it's an administrative rule, and it says that the county mental health authority is to, by court order, determine if people who have been criminally committed to the state hospital to be restored, but they can be restored in the community instead. That's our function. So we have staff that do that. The statute and rule also say that with the funding you receive from the state for aid and assist, you can also help coordinate services. So for those defendants, we have a role in coordinating services. It means working with the defendant to determine what their clinical needs are and to try to connect them with the right level of care in the community. But those other gears include the willingness of the defendant. The defendant doesn't have any insight into her disorder, and let's say it's schizophrenia. Let's say she's in a deep crisis, and what got her arrested was she was so psychotic, she thought that she owned the car that she got in and drove away in. She's in jail. Jail is trying to provide her with medications. She's unwilling to take them. Her attorney goes before the judge and says, Judge, my client is unable to aid and assist. Please send her to the state hospital. So if the client is unwilling to participate, that year kind of freezes things up unless they get committed to the state hospital. Because at the state hospital, they've got staffing to try to encourage that person to participate, but also they can provide emergency medicines if the person is presenting a danger because of that disorder. Another one of those gears is having a community mental health system that can meet their clinical needs. And also within the substance use disorder realm of services. In Oregon, as you all know, Medicaid is managed by coordinated care organizations, or CCOs. That includes the behavioral health benefit. In Washington County, there are 2 CCOs, Trillium and Care Oregon, that manage that benefit. So the vast majority of criminal defendants under 370 become eligible for Medicaid after they leave the hospital or leave jail. So the coordination of those services and the provision of those services is done or paid for by the CCOs. Another gear is communication between the defense attorney, and for many of these defendants, it's a public defender that includes the Metropolitan Public Defender's office. And they really have to be communicating at a high level with county mental health, with the district attorney's office, and with the court. And of course, the last gear, which is critical, is a specialty court, and we have that in Washington County. We'll talk about that. So that's the model for Washington County, which is basically the same across the state. There have been some important changes legislatively in the last couple of years, really in the response to some of those watershed moments that I described before, in the form of bills. Senate Bill 24, that was part of the 2019 session, and Senate Bill 295, that was in the 2021 session. And both really aimed to make it really clear who's responsible for what within aid and assist, and to also minimize the dependence or the reliance on the state hospital. So for many of these defendants, the state hospital is the default option. And these 2 bills really aim to decrease that. And they did to a certain extent. Senate Bill 24 took away the ability for a judge to briefly commit somebody to the state hospital for 30 days to be evaluated. So up until Senate Bill 2024 was enacted, a judge could have someone sent at the bare minimum for a month to be evaluated. That got stripped of the statute in 2029 or 2019. It also gave the forensic evaluator, so those that are to determine if a defendant is unable to aid and assist, it added to the list of things that they have to provide an opinion on, to include, does this person need to be in the state hospital? That was added in 2019. It also added to the statute the requirement for the court early on in the life of one of these 370 criminal cases. So a judge finds the defendant unable to aid and assist within a month of being booked in jail. Shortly thereafter, the judge is to convene a meeting that includes all the parties. So the defense attorney, the defendant, the prosecutor, the county mental health, to talk about some alternatives to the state hospital, which might include dismissing the case. It might include putting the person under community restoration. It might include civil commitment. So in Oregon, a person can be committed civilly to the state hospital. It's a different statute. That was added. Again, the idea is, how do we lessen the number of people going through the pipeline to the state hospital? And it also stripped from the statute the requirement that county mental health supervise people who are under community restoration. So if a defendant is ordered from the state hospital to participate in restoration services in the community, up until Senate Bill 295 was passed, it said the county has to supervise those folks, which means act as a parole officer or a probation officer. That got removed. I'd like to chat briefly about some collaboration.
Removed as a requirement by 295?
By 295.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I believe as a county, so that includes the district attorney's office, the court, county mental health, got above the curve a bit. So 2 years ago, our office and the district attorney's office approached then presiding judge Hunsaker with the idea of creating a special docket for aid and assist cases that includes really looking for defendants that are in such that are suffering because of mental illness to try to fast track into the state hospital, but also to rule out people that we think probably, although the judge has written an order to determine if they're unable to aid and assist, they likely will be able to aid and assist. So we as a collective wanted to have an opportunity to rule that out early on. That was started about 2 years ago when Judge Hunsaker left the county and Judge Roberts became presiding judge. She received the torch and has maintained that docket since then. We meet every month with the DA's office. We'll talk about that in a subsequent slide here. And I asked that we parking lot the settlement agreement in 2021. So the state was not in compliance with admitting people to the state hospital. The DRO had gone back to the federal court saying, you've got to do something about this. The federal court brought the state hospital and DRO back to the table. They agreed to have OHA contract with a subject matter expert on this type of an issue. So they contracted with Dr. Pinels out of Michigan, who's an expert on aid and assist. And the doctor generated 2 reports that list out a bunch of recommendations. And in the midst of her generating this last report, something else happened. The state had gone back to having a very difficult time admitting people in a timely fashion. The federal judge, Mossman, got involved and said, the next step is for the state of Oregon, OHA, the CCOs, county mental health authorities to meet the goals outlined in Dr. Pinel's report. And also, the state hospital has to dramatically decrease the amount of time that they can detain somebody under criminal commitment. And with that, I'd like to ask Sheriff Garrett and our DA to come and join me. So this next slide will prompt us to talk about kind of the basics of Mossman. And I can kind of start the conversation off by saying counties, district attorney's offices, jails around the state were pretty alarmed by this, because up until this order, people who were charged with, say, a Measure 11 crime could be detained in the state hospital for up to 3 years. And for those that would participate in treatment, and I mentioned that one important gear, which is the defendant participating in treatment, for many of those defendants, that was enough time. If they were participating in treatment, receiving medicine, that could give us enough time. But under the Mossman order, those defendants cannot be detained more than 1 year.
So good afternoon, everyone. And as Mr. Woolley pointed out, I think the important thing to understand is what changed as a result of Judge Mossman's order. Before I talk about what changed, I do want to say that I think everyone in the room would agree that we want to minimize the amount of time that anyone who has a mental health issue is in custody. So that is, I think, a baseline common belief and understanding that we all have. And often in the justice system, we're presented with challenges where some of the root causes that may be underlying the mental health and other challenges have occurred before that person lands on our doorstep, almost like the emergency room in a hospital, where root causes of complex health conditions sometimes take years in the making, and yet the ER is charged with treating everyone that comes in the front door. The justice system is often, I think, in that same capacity, where these root causes are years in the making and may be out of our direct control, and yet the justice system ends up being called upon to interact with them. And here we are with mental health issues. So before Judge Mossman's order, typically speaking, for a felony level charge, the hospital would have up to 3 years in order to rehabilitate someone, to help that person become fit to proceed again in the criminal case. And the vast majority of people that needed that rehabilitation would actually be able to achieve that level of rehabilitation where they could be able to be fit to proceed forward. That would be for a felony charge, 3 years. For misdemeanors, the hospital had essentially up to 1 year or the maximum amount of time that might apply for the particular felony charge. So for a C misdemeanor, that would be 30 days. For a B misdemeanor, 6 months. For A misdemeanor, 1 year. What changed, as you can see in the bottom of the slide in front of you, is now under Judge Mossman's order, there are new time limits at play. So now for misdemeanors, rather than up to 1 year, it's 90 days. And now for felonies, for general felonies, including violent felonies, now for general and violent felonies, rather than 3 years, it's 6 months. And for the most violent felonies, measure 11 felonies, it's now rather than 3 years, it's 1 year. And I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about what types of charges are we talking about here. So keep in mind, for example, domestic violence. Here we are, it's October. Many of us went to the domestic violence event here last week in Washington County. You did a proclamation. The vast majority of domestic violence charges are misdemeanors. They're not felonies, and they're not measure 11 felonies. So most DV charges will fall in the 90-day period of time. The concern that many of us felt when these new rules came into place is these guidelines are based on the charge that's filed, and they don't take into account issues beyond the charge that's filed. So they don't take into account the person. So if you have someone with a dangerous criminal history who may be a threat to a victim or to the public, but the charge is a misdemeanor, it's 90 days. Charge is a felony, it's 6 months. Charge is a measure 11 felony, it's 1 year. So that's what changed as a result of Judge Mossman's order.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners, Sheriff Pat Garrett here. So we ran an updated list yesterday of those Oregon State Hospital patients from the Washington County Jail. And that number totals 59. You heard Mr. Woolley earlier say in 2013 it was 7. Of that population, 59 from the Washington County Jail, currently in the Oregon State Hospital. Those who exceed the time limits in Judge Mossman's order and are currently eligible to be returned to the Washington County Jail include 4 Measure 11 charges, four individuals facing Measure 11 charges, 9 individuals facing other felony charges, and 5 individuals facing misdemeanor charges.
We thought it would be helpful to talk about the various roles and responsibilities across the state and local government. So within the state, the Oregon Health Authority is responsible, of course, for managing the state hospital, but they also manage contracts for those who are eligible for Medicaid. So we talked about the coordinated care organizations, they hold those contracts. When we think about the provision of behavioral health services in Oregon for those that qualify for Medicaid, the state contracts for those services. The state also funds and regulates locked treatment facilities. So if we think about what might be an alternative to the state hospital for people that might have significant symptoms to where they need a locked level of care, or it might be because of the level of their charge, the state hospital regulates those homes. Now, one of the things that's part of our history as a state is that we have a dramatic need for more locked treatment facilities. In the early 2000s, there was a significant increase in the number of those facilities and other intensive residential programs. That development came to a halt around 2008. And then we hit this crisis. So the state does not have the alternative facilities for people who are going to be timing out of the state hospital, or for people who are doing well in the state hospital and the natural Next, least restrictive residence is one of those facilities. So in the absence of those facilities, the state, we're in a real pickle, right? The person can't be detained to the state hospital. They're too dangerous to be in the community. They're going to be returned to the jail. And that obviously is problematic. And one thing that's different too for people who are committed under the criminal law compared to those that are committed under the civil law. If I'm committed civilly and I am suffering greatly because of my mental illness and I'm not eating, for example, and I'm getting sick, it's not a comfortable thing to talk about, but the state hospital can force medicate me. And with the goal of relieving my symptoms, getting me to a place where I can be transitioned out of the state hospital. That can only really be done under criminal commitment, under a special order called the cell order, and the bar for that is extremely high. Or if the person in the moment is proving eminently dangerous to people in front of them, nurses, other patients. So it's very common for someone to get committed criminally to the state hospital, to not participate in treatment, to be as ill as one can get, and sometimes get even worse while in the state hospital. So that's one big difference between civil and criminal. Another is on the criminal side. If I'm civilly committed to the state hospital, there's a team of social workers that will be providing aftercare planning for me. From the moment I get there, it's an administrative rule. Under the criminal commitment, they don't do that discharge planning, that release planning. So that's a big missing piece in the system. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we're doing to improve things, which includes the county actually providing that care coordination. And then locally, within Health and Human Services, I described aid and assist services, which I supervise. So we provide some care coordination. We provide monitoring of people who are being restored in the community, not supervising them like a probation officer, but checking in on them, making sure they know what the care plan is, making sure they're participating in legal skills training. That is a requirement of being under community restoration, is that you participate in legal skills training. We provide that skills training. And then we also act as a conduit for natural support. So if the person is in the state hospital or in jail, we try to make sure that those natural supports, be it a brother or a parent, are able to communicate with our client. We try to act as a bridge for information between community mental health providers and jail medical, which is MAFCare. And we also provide substance use disorder services, which you all know quite a bit about.
So did you have a question, Chair Harrington?
Yes, I do. I know you're going to help me understand more detail. But I'm curious as to, given that funding plays such a critical role in our ability to ensure the individuals have care, why are the CCOs not shown here? You've got state government, you have local government, but as you just articulated, it seems to me that there's a role that the CCOs play, particularly Trillium and I forgot the other name already, but I wrote it down, here in our community of Washington County. So why are they not listed here as part of the roles and responsibilities?
That's a great question. So I would see them as an extension of the Oregon Health Authority. So they provide services on behalf of the Oregon Health Authority.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to.
Oh, no problem. So, in thinking about who does what, the key takeaway, I think for me is this is truly an ecosystem where it's not one particular actor or individual. We really all have to function well together. And when one aspect of the ecosystem is impacted, just like as we know occurs in the environment, everything else within the ecosystem is also impacted. So in the DA's office and in the court, we are a key part of that ecosystem. Of course, the DA makes the decision about which cases to proceed forward on initially. But when someone is unable to aid and assist, we actually take a step back at that point because the court process cannot continue until that person is rehabilitated. And it's important also, I think, to understand that we're not talking about whether that person had a mental issue at the time of the crime. We're talking about, do they have some sort of mental issue at the time of the prosecution, at the time of the criminal case, such that they're unable to aid and assist in their own defense. Sometimes they also had something at the time of the crime, and that's actually a different legal process, but we're talking instead about what's happening right now during the active criminal case. So when that occurs, the DA takes a step back. We are involved to the extent that we're aware that this is happening, and we can, if we disagree, for example, with the findings by the state hospital, we can contest those findings. So for example, if the hospital says, we think this person is still unable to aid and assist, the DA's office can say, well, we disagree, and we think in fact they can. And that's called a contested aid and assist hearing, where you have an argument in front of a judge and a judge will ultimately decide. So that's where the court can be involved. The other area where the court is involved, as Mr. Woolley mentioned earlier, we developed a couple of years ago this specialty docket called a rapid fitness to proceed docket. And like many good ideas, we stole it from someone else. Marion County had the idea first, and it showed great promise in Marion County, which is why we implemented it here, where we basically took what had been about a 2-month process to figure out, does someone have an aid and assist issue? And we shrunk it down from 2 months on average to 2 weeks on average. Why is that important? During those 2 months, that person might be sitting in the sheriff's jail. And so obviously the less time we can have someone with a mental health concern sitting in custody, the better it is for everyone involved, especially including the person who's accused of a crime and may have a mental health issue. That process sees about 100 people a year. So I think last year we had about 97 people that went through that process. So it's, as I said earlier, showing great promise. The other area where the court is involved is essentially helping make the decision at the beginning of this aid and assist process of whether someone needs to go to the hospital for a hospital level of care or can remain here in the community. So when that initial decision is made, it's ultimately not the county's decision. It's not the DA's decision. It's actually the circuit court judge's decision to decide, does this person need a hospital level of care or can they remain here in the county for community restoration? The court makes that decision with input from all the other actors, but ultimately the judge makes that decision. And the judge makes the decision about whether to accept that person back from the hospital when they're on something called a ready to place list. When the hospital says, we're finished with them now, we think we can send them back to you.
For the sheriff's office role is just to continue to collaborate with the partners listed on this slide. And Chair Harrington, you identified some others, and I would add to this list an extension in the sheriff's office is our partnership with Disability Rights Oregon. We have a good working relationship with that very smart advocacy nonprofit. Our role includes transporting Oregon State Hospital aid and assist patients from our jail to the hospital and back when they need to be transported, and then finding them a bed in jail when we need to do that. And I'll elaborate a little bit more about that later.
Great. In this next slide, we'd like to cover some of the challenges that we think the system faces in the wake of the Mossman decision. So in terms of the courts, so again, Judge Roberts is the judge that oversees that docket. So every Thursday and Friday at 1:15 until 3:30, it's a stacked docket. So Judge Roberts holds status hearings. So, and the DA is the expert on this. I'll try to speak to it best I can. But in the life of a criminal case, and I would say especially aid and assist cases, there can be 20 status hearings. And Judge Roberts hears those on Thursdays and Fridays. It can be a very enlightening experience seeing her juggle that, to see the deputy district attorneys juggle that caseload, to see the defense attorneys juggle that caseload. I see that as one of the challenges, but I also see it as a big opportunity, and we'll get to why that is in the next slide.
And I think maybe talking about the challenges, the first thing that I always think about is so many people that are in that courtroom that Mr. Woolley just described were never intended to be people making decisions about mental health. A judge who really had no formal training, no judges have formal training in that area other than what they pick up as a judge along the way. Prosecutors and defense attorneys and lawyers, it's not part of the law school experience to learn about mental health. And yet here we are in a system where our system now spends an increasing amount of time, energy, and resources on mental health issues. So a huge challenge is we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It's an area that was never meant to deal with this challenge, just like the jails were never meant to house mentally ill individuals. So that to me is challenge number one. Another big challenge is, Judge Mossman was, in my opinion, absolutely right. There's a real problem because the Mink order, which said, hey, if someone's in jail, they shouldn't be there longer than 7 days before they get to the hospital. That's a good thing. And the hospital was failing at meeting that requirement. So in that sense, Judge Mossman, I believe, is absolutely right. There's a real problem. The challenge that we now have is in solving that one problem, by essentially creating room at the hospital, by solving that one problem, we now have several other problems that need to be solved. And it's up to us collectively in this room and beyond to try and solve those problems. The analogy I've always used, it's a little bit like squeezing a balloon. So we did squeeze, the balloon was squeezed to decrease the people that are at the hospital by discharging some early to make room for more. But we all know what happens when you squeeze one end of a balloon, the other end pops out. And now we're dealing with that popping out. So my big question is, what do we do now? And I wish the slide after this said, here are all the answers. And maybe that's yet to come. I think we have a lot of good ideas, and we'll talk about those in a bit, and a lot of promising steps that we can take. But to be really blunt, we don't have the answers. We're still trying to figure this out as we go along. There are 13 people now that we've received notice from the hospital that are coming back to Washington County, to the jail from the hospital. Every couple of days, I get a new notice about a couple more people. And I always look to see, okay, who are we dealing with? And some of them present bigger public safety threats than others. Not every one of them is a tremendous public safety threat. I want to be really upfront about that. Some of them have committed what I'm going to call quality of life crimes. They've stolen something repeatedly sometimes, or they presented some sort of disorderly conduct situation, and they legitimately committed a crime, but they didn't have a knife or a gun or hurt somebody. Others are significant public safety threats. People accused of murder, people accused of Measure 11 crimes, people accused of sex crimes, et cetera. And so the real question is, what do we do now?
Our public safety challenges include releasing somebody who hasn't gone through the court process entirely from jail to create a bed for somebody from the hospital who's returned. As you know, we have a significant overcrowding issue at the jail. And when we do that, it is an inefficient drain on the justice system. People are less likely to go to court. There's new warrants for their arrest because they don't go to court. Crimes get committed sometimes that would not have been committed had they remained in jail. So that is one challenge. We're going to be faced with the challenge to develop a plan for community restoration for those individuals who are too dangerous and will have to remain in jail. Those returned from the hospital and remain in jail, one challenge will be addressing the possibility they will deteriorate in jail, and their deterioration would cause an increased threat to the safety of themselves, to staff, and those around them. Another challenge for Oregon State Hospital returns would be, while we have clinician and mental health services in our jail's purpose, construction, services are just not conducive to restoration. So that will challenge us. Another challenge will come if we administer emergency or forced medications as part of restoration, which is a function that should be performed in a hospital setting. Administering forced medications in jail for aid and assist defendants will require more staff. It will require increased cost. There will be an increased cost with it. And we will essentially take over what has up until now been done in a hospital setting. And I think that's an alarming milestone for us. If that's the result of this order. And then we're also challenged to determine what to do if community restoration does not work for those who are remain in jail after their return.
And I'd like to speak to some of the behavioral health challenges that that we are witnessing. And it's primarily for those clients who just lack the insight into their mental disorder. So they're not interested in participating in treatment. And even if we're able to connect them with a mental health provider and a nurse practitioner to prescribe medicines, unless they're willing to participate, we can't force that. We don't want to force that. That can be a challenge. Housing can be a big issue. If you're someone who your only income is a SSI check every month, let's say $800, and you can't afford an apartment, living on the street is going to make it very difficult for you to actually participate meaningfully in service, including community restoration services. We also have been in the midst of a methamphetamine epidemic for a good 20 years, and it's getting worse and worse. It's not uncommon for our clients to be active users of methamphetamine. So we just had someone who was in the state hospital for a good year, transitioned him to a locked treatment facility. He did great. He's someone who I've known him since he's 19 and he's in his 40s now. And he transitioned from that locked facility, and I got a call on Monday that he's using methamphetamine again and likely will be getting, the attention of law enforcement and might end up back in jail. So methamphetamine is, as you all know, is something that is just so destructive, especially with people under community restoration. And then just in general, and this is a byproduct of the pandemic, our community mental health providers, our nonprofits out there are having a hard time of staffing up. Most of those services are funded by the CCOs. The county, as you all know, has a contract for folks that don't have private insurance that need that level of care. That's a struggle. We'll talk about some of the remedies that we'll be applying in the years to come in the next slide. And then providing clinical support in the jail. As Sheriff Garrett had mentioned, there's a medical team in the jail. It's contracted between the sheriff's office and the provider. NAFCare is the provider right now. They provide psychiatric services there. If the defendant is someone who's been receiving services at one of our providers in, say, Hillsborough, and is now booked, it's important for NAFCare to be able to communicate with that provider. So teeing up that conversation has been tricky. We've got some creative things that we're working on to make it less difficult, but that can be hard as well. The fact that the mental health authority, the folks that I supervise within the mental health authority, provide aid and assist services, we don't have access to the electronic medical record that Gel Medical maintains. So that can make it tricky too. We've got some interesting things we're going to be doing to make a difference there, which I'll speak to in a little bit. And I mentioned earlier that we can't force people to take medicines. And for most of these disorders that are causing the primary clinical issues, they respond really well to medicine. If you think of a thought disorder like schizophrenia, those symptoms that kind of get them in trouble respond really well to medicines. But if they're not willing to take the medicines, we're probably not going to be able to impact things very much for them. And with that, I'd like to move on to the next slide, which is some of the things we're doing to make a difference.
I think I'm up first. So I'd like to start first by talking about what myself and two other DAs are trying to do in federal court. So I found myself for the first time ever in my career in federal court as a prosecutor. That's not typically where a state prosecutor is. But a little over a month ago, the DA in Clackamas County, the DA in Marion County, and myself, we hired former U.S. Attorney Billy Williams, some of you may know, to represent us. And then we, along with County Counsel for Washington County and Marion County, appeared in federal court. And it's an effort essentially to try to bring light to some of these issues, these other unintended consequences from Judge Mossman's order. And one thing that we're trying to do, if you think back to that slide that talked about the different timelines, 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year, we're trying to allow for some wiggle room there, essentially, to allow for more crimes to fall in the 1 year category, because we believe for some of these more serious crimes, a little bit more time at the hospital might be valuable and might mitigate the impact of people coming back to the county. We're also trying to see if there's a way that we can ask for a safety valve, if you will. So the ability to petition the federal court for an exception to be made if there's a particular person who represents a unique public safety risk to a particular victim or to a particular community, to say, you know what, even though this person may fall into one of these three buckets, but their particular circumstance makes them subject to perhaps a safety valve type exception. So looking for ways to mitigate, I think, some of the one size fits all aspect of that federal order might work to the county's advantage by mitigating who comes back from the state hospital. So that's one thing that we're trying to do. Another thing that we're trying to do is come up with a plan for, okay, we know that there are going to be people coming back here. What do we do next? And if you think about it, really, there's not a lot of places to put these people. So they come back, they're going to come back to the jail. Not all of them can or should be in the jail. So some may need to remain there based on the public safety risk. So someone charged with, for example, murder might very well need to remain in the jail, despite the challenges that would come with housing that person in the jail with mental health issues. But others may not need to remain there, but where do they go? And coming up with a plan for where they can go is paramount. There aren't a lot of options out there. There are no open beds at secure residential treatment facilities. There are some places you can send individuals, but they don't have that level of security that the state hospital would have or that the jail would have. And we've seen examples in the news. In fact, about a month, maybe a month and a half ago, there was an example in Portland where a woman walked out of the Northwest Regional Reentry Facility, where we have sent people to in the past, and she had some mental health issues. She was there. And she actually went into someone's home and crawled into the bed of I think a child in that particular home. And it made the news because of how shocking that was. We're going to be dealing with more situations like that because some of these people are going to be homeless. They're going to be staying in some of the shelters that we have in the county. Some of them may be staying in some of their friends' houses here in the county. And some of them we may not know quite where they are. And that's the ongoing challenge of what do we do with those folks.
If I could add to that, just thinking about the court, Judge Roberts, again, who oversees the aid and assist docket, she is going out of her way to create space in that busy docket to go off the record, to have the prosecutor, to have the defense attorney, to have my staff back in her chambers to talk about what we can do to improve the circumstance for these defendants. I think that's really something to be excited about. And it's also a good segue into some things that we are doing within Health and Human Services. So I described all those different gears that are interdependent. One is having aid and assist services provided by the county that are effective. We were flat funded for all those years. In the 2021 session, as you all know, the legislature committed extra funds for aid and assist to be pushed out to counties. That was done in the form of an RFA, a request for applications. We responded to that, and we got about 75% of what we asked for. And that money was made available starting in July. And because of the COLA related hiring freeze, we weren't able to get those positions filled until this week. So just yesterday, we onboarded 2 new staff. So there are 2 master's level clinicians. One's going to be a fixture in the court. It's going to be there to be making sure we're connecting these defendants with services, that we're communicating closely with the defense attorney to make sure we're available to be back there in Judge Roberts' chambers when she wants to talk about getting creative. We have hired a care coordinator to be working with people under community restoration, to be linking people with services, to be staying in touch with the client, but also their attorney, to make sure that they are bringing to the surface things that the client is doing that is mitigating concerns that the court might have. We are also interviewing this week, today or tomorrow and Friday, for a bachelor's level clinician that will be officed at the jail, looking for people who are suffering from a mental illness, who likely will be found aid and assist. Instead of us getting involved once the person's been sent to the state hospital, we're going to be looking for these residents early on, shortly after booking. So we hope to have that person in that position by mid-November. We also were given funds to create housing opportunities. So there's a terrific nonprofit that you all may know of called Transcending Hope. And they really try to provide low barrier housing to people that are caught up in the criminal justice system. And they have restructured one of their homes just for our clients in the Rock Creek area. And so we're able to refer people who we think are low risk but need that level of support. It has someone with lived experience who has a room at the house, and we've asked them to expand that to other homes. We're working on an RFP to create up to 20 supported housing units, either on-site or scattered sites for these clients. Those are just some of the examples of what we think will make a big difference down the road, and we've already got things going with the staff that I just described. Regionally, and this was Mr. Barton's idea, we have pulled the regional counties together. So the district attorney's offices, mental health authority, to talk about some ways that we as a collective can make a difference. And that might mean having regional locked residential facilities that we all help support. It might mean having legal skills trainers that work as a hub. And our first meeting is the 7th of November. Another idea that came out of that same discussion was bringing the county mental health authority staff on my team together with jail medical and the sheriff's office to figure out a way that we can increase our supports for people in custody under aid and assist.
I just want to add that, the title of this slide is work in progress. And I just couldn't be more thankful to Mr. Woolley and the entire behavioral health team, DA Barton and his team, presiding Judge Proctor, the aid and assist docket Judge Roberts, really partnering up in a real strong collaborative way to address what is a incredibly significant challenge for our community with this order.
And before we wrap up, we have just a closing slide. I'd like to invite Tom Powers up to talk about some of the potential legislative concepts that are being worked on.
We're going to wrap this topic up at 2:05, and you need to allow time for questions from the commissioners.
Thank you, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. My name is Tom Powers, one of your government relations managers, and I'll be very brief, just describing some of the potential legislative concepts that may be introduced for the 2023 legislative session. This information comes from a variety of sources, but last Friday we had the local government advisory committee meeting, as Commissioner Willie referenced, in this morning's leadership communications. And just to highlight a few different legislative proposals that are under potential consideration for the next session. We know that the Senate Judiciary Committee may be introducing a measure around indemnification for counties that provide community restoration services. This is a measure that had been introduced in prior sessions and did not pass. And there is a new concept that's been floated that may be introduced that's around analyzing the costs of providing the services of community restorations from the state down to the county, similar to the process that community corrections undertakes in preparation for its budget and delivering services. And those are two bills that may be coming from the county level to the state. There may be bills that the health authority will introduce as well. And we're trying to learn more about those bills at this time. Right now, they're not totally published online, but we are aware that they may codify some of the elements of Dr. Pinel's recommendations. That concludes my report. Thank you. I'll turn it back to Mr. Woolley.
What we could do is race through to our last slide and quickly go through it, unless you'd like to.
I just
Go
want to
into the
make
Q&A.
sure you know we have only till 5 past.
How about we start with the Q&A, and then if we have time, we'll go through the last couple of slides.
Commissioners, I know I have a couple of questions if you want me to start.
Why don't you jump in?
Okay.
Sure, I've got some too, but go ahead.
Okay, so first question goes to slide number 8, where you were talking about the RFA and Washington County received 75% of what it asked. And then you talked about the 2 new hires, an additional coordinated care person, another new clinician to be hired, and then you referred to money dealing with housing. That's great. But my specific question is, what is the time horizon for those funds? I assume they're limited duration. It's
Well,
great, we got funds, but for how long?
Right, so we've gotten word from OHA, they intend to continue that funding beyond this biennium.
So it was at least for this biennium, but any continuation is part of OHA's budget.
Correct. And one of the things they did was they created a separate funding stream just for these new dollars. They're referring to that as expansion dollars to expand community mental health aid and assist teams. And what we understand is they plan to continue that. They've also got a quarterly report, basically just showing our deliverables, how we're using that money. And we think that's going to clearly show that we're generating the outcomes that they anticipated.
I just want to make sure that our GR team has it as part of what we need to follow up and make happen. Because you can only do as good a job as we are successful in getting the funds to do. So thank you. Then my second, and I assumed when you said earlier about funding, can you tell them a money geek? You talked about how in 2013 with overwhelm, there were 17 in the facility, could help with money, provided money for 2 staff at Washington County. I assume that that funding has remained in place.
Yes,
Ever since.
great question. So there are 2 separate funding streams. One is this expanded money for the expansion, and then the
Of course, cost and inflation and whatnot, what we're receiving and what it costs to maintain those 2 resources, I assume has been falling on us.
right. And one of the things that OHA did was they actually paid us in the rears for some of the burden that we assumed.
Okay,
We repurposed staff. We used county general fund money to stay afloat, and then they were able to use
Okay,
funds to
okay.
backfill.
great. So that was the first question. The second one, you previously, and I really appreciated the order of your explaining things. You talked about how there was the 2021 settlement agreement and contracting with Dr. Pennell's, the second report, and then this new thing happened, AKA, I'm shorthanding here, the Mossman decision. And so you've all done a great job. Thank you, not only in what we've been getting for reports, but what you've covered here today about how you're trying to work through all the difficulties there, I should say challenges. But for a moment, I'd like to put that aside because my sense, not being a subject matter expert at all, like all of you, is that we still had limits on resources that the county has, on community restoration availability. And what I'm concerned about is that as we move forward, there's so much cause of immediate concern, given the Mossman decision, that we might possibly lose sight of the need for further support. Though, Tom, I did write down that one of the potential ledge concepts is dealing with that. I guess what I need to hear is that as things move forward in enacting those recommendations, that the need for funding at the community level will be so apparent to our legislators. I guess I just needed to hear myself say that more than get any further answers from you. Thank you for being patient with me. That was it for my questions. Commissioners.
Yeah, and following back up on your very last point, I would like to be as optimistic as possible that our legislators understand and are willing to fund this process. But I doubt that is the case because how did we get here? Because they obviously didn't understand the problems that they were creating. So with that, at the Friday meeting that I was at, they talked about crisis receiving centers. We have the CAT and we have 2 locations. One is going to have beds, one is not. Are we going to be, I'm kind of looking at Marnie on this, are we going to be able to have be one of those crisis receiving centers? And because as all of them have said, we don't have enough beds. We don't have enough facility space. So Would that be a possibility?
So we are collectively trying to come up with some solutions to have receiving centers and secure receiving centers. But we need funding to do that, and we have to figure out, especially in the short term, if it's in the jail, how we address all those concerns that Sheriff Garrett went over. The CAT is really specific for substance use disorders. So sometimes people in this situation, as Chance described, also have substance abuse disorders like methamphetamine. But if they don't, the CAT is really for that. So this is really a related but different issue. And then I also will say that we didn't go over it, but on the screen is some of the short and long-term strategies that we're recommending that the board consider. And so I think some of that goes to what you were pointing out, Chair Harrington, around some of the legislative support and the requests to make sure when you have an opportunity, when you're talking to our state legislators, that you're feeling comfortable talking about this. That's what we're hoping to provide.
Well, and on that, I'm certainly comfortable about describing the challenges and needs. But I have to say, I am a little frustrated by certain legislators who are pretty smart people, holding the line that they want to see that there are innovative best practices and are displacing community service work that is critical to meeting immediate needs, all for the desire to hear that some best known method is being enacted. And so telling that story of how moving forward on both increasing the capacity of the system to comply with the Mossman order at the same time that we need to increase capacity for the Pinellas is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of our strategies, is to point to that full report and all of the recommendations. So they sort of pulled a few out that without the context of the rest, it doesn't work. It causes more problems than it solves.
Okay.
And these guys can speak to that much better, but I know we're short on time.
I get it.
No, that's all I have for right now in the instance of time, and to give family pieces.
Okay, well, I think this is a good place to wrap up. Any questions about these remaining bullet points? I do anticipate that it's going to be a very busy legislative session.
Of course, yeah.
With lots of LCs around this issue.
I guess my question would be, how would we even begin to go about reversing the order?
Well, if the way Mossman wrote that order, if the state can go 3 months with not violating mink, so they can go 3 months with not delaying the admission of these defendants, then Mossman's over.
Is it once and done, or is it continuous?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but what I can say is there's another opportunity to reverse the order, and that's coming up in January. I don't recall the precise date, but Judge Mossman, at the hearing we had about a month and a half ago, essentially, he recognized that the counties and the DAs didn't have an opportunity to essentially let him know input that they had. And he wants that input. And so he's going to give us the opportunity to gather data and all of the things we talked about today. No one told Judge Mossman all of these things at the hearing that we had a month and a half ago. And so we'll have the opportunity to present that information and more in January at a hearing. So there's an opportunity there to modify or change or do something with that order as well.
Okay. Well,
The hearing on the 21st that I described this morning.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that's right.
so on behalf of the commission, thank you very much for putting together this really broad yet as well deep overview, emphasis on the word overview, of what is happening, the expertise that the county has, the collaborative work that you're all engaged with so that we can best serve our community and the individuals that need our help. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. So next we are moving to the topic of directing staff to develop a reapportionment ordinance based on Plan 4 or 5 from the final Portland State University Population Research Center's reapportionment report. And commissioners, just a heads up, you may have some new feedback from local electeds. I know I do. I've chosen to hold that until we have the opportunity to talk here in our open session so that I'm complying appropriately. Take it away, please.
All right, good afternoon again, Chair Harrington and Board. For the record on this agenda item, I'm Marnie Kyle, an Assistant County Administrator. I know who I am this time. And once again, we have a really collaborative cross-county team of experts that includes Joe from Assessment and Taxation. We have Tom Carr, Brenda. We have all sorts of folks that are really, Amanda is behind me as well, helping us with this project, a really important project. So today,
And I have to say, per the agenda, I forgot to take a break between these two subjects. Are we going to be okay going for another half hour? Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
This is
So-
riveting information.
for today, as with other agendas like this, we're gonna review what is our key question for you all today. A really quick reminder of the project purpose for anybody that's listening in that doesn't know. A review of the timelines, the approved factors again, and then really dig into proposal 4 and 5, which you all asked us to bring forward for this conversation today. So the key question for today is, does your board accept the final reapportionment report developed by the Population Research Center at Portland State University from the county official? And so you should have received that in this packet. And then the second question is, which proposal does your board direct staff to include in an ordinance for the board to consider on the first reading on November 1st of 2022?
Who's doing?
That's me, sorry.
Thank you.
So just as a reminder, the process required by Washington County Charter of redrawing the established commissioner boundaries, that is really the purpose of this project, is to review those boundaries every 10 years by the Census Bureau. As a result of population shifts, the lines are redrawn so the districts are roughly equal in population. Every county resident is represented by the county chair and a county commissioner elected from the district before the reapportionment process and after. So it's really important because some community members are a little confused, but before and after they will have a representative in their district. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe to talk about the reapportionment timelines.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. For the record, my name is Joe Nelson. I'm the Director of Assessment and Taxation. We need to have the next slide, please. This is the timeline that we've seen over and over again. So I'll do a very quick overview of this because there may be members of the public who have not seen this. The process when we started this board directed us to focus on transparency, community trust, and a great deal of community engagement. And we've done that at every step of the way with this. A quick review, very beginning, I was appointed county official and I generated the report that said that District 2 was above the 105% threshold, which required us to do the reapportionment process. We developed factors and we referred those to Portland State University to come up with proposals. They initially came up with 4 proposals And through community engagement and working with the board, proposal 2 was modified to 2B, and we added a 5th proposal. After community engagement, which was the next step, we met on September 27th, and we minimized or reduced these proposals from 5 down to proposal 4 and 5. Those are the 2 that remain. So today, the purpose is to present you with the final report and present and hopefully your acceptance. And after that, it's going to trigger the 90-day clock for the ordinance creation and adoption. In that process, it's going to be a first reading, then a second reading and a public hearing, and then finally the adoption. And we have a deadline on this as January 6th.
That is the statutory deadline?
No,
I can speak to that. That is a deadline that we've calculated based on the time someone would need to reside in the district if they sought to run for election in the 2024 election. You have to have lived in the district for 2 years before you take office, and the office date is January 6th, 2025.
Thank you. Related to that, so hard stop at January 6, 2023. Worst case scenario, through our discussions today, we want a proposal that is a variation on either 4 or 5 or any combination. Through the ordinance process, do we have the flexibility to declare an emergency so that, or could you investigate that with your team so that if it's instead of 90 days, if it's 80 days, pulling a number out?
Chair Harrington, it's 30 days. So our plan is to adopt the final ordinance on November 29th, which would be 30 days before, essentially 31 days before, 32 days before the end of the year. So there is some flexibility. There isn't a meeting in there where we could get to exactly January 5th.
I can call a special meeting.
Yes, you
if
can.
need to.
So we could do that. We need 2 weeks between readings.
Yeah.
So it gets a little challenging. And I've
But
thought
it
a
is
little bit
doable.
about.
I just feel like January 6th is doable.
Okay.
That's all. I'm just trying to make it clear that we just need to do what we can to provide clear direction. And I think we have it within our means to meet that deadline without putting.
So is the emergency clause available though? Should we?
I would lean against it. If it comes to something we need, I'd have to do some more research, but it's hard to say it's an emergency because we didn't meet our own deadlines. So,
But we're in crisis.
but again, if that's something I'd face, I'd have to research it and make sure it's defensible before you did that. I'm hoping we can meet our deadlines and not need to do an emergency, making an effective report. On the other part of this, to be clear, the deadline is a matter of courtesy. So as long as someone knows that you're changing it, they could make their plans. As a legal matter, it's neater if the ordinance is actually effective before that date, but it's not absolutely required. And Chair, to answer your question directly, there's no state law that says you have to do it. It just seems more fair to have the ordinance in place before someone would have to make a decision on where they were going to reside if they were going to run in 2024.
January 6th plus or minus 7 days. Got it.
So just following along that line of thought, Tom, trying to make sure that we don't take somebody out of a district into another district and then all of a sudden they don't have 2 years in that district. Do we have any way to determine in proposals 4 and 5 how many people we're taking out of one district and putting in another district? Do we have a head count?
Yes.
It's in the report.
Absolutely. So the
Yeah,
districts have to
haven't
be
seen
roughly
that.
150,000 people, and and District 2 was larger by about.
No, I was talking
10,000.
about how many people are we taking out of District 2 and putting in District 4 if we go with proposal 5? How many people we taking out of District 4 and putting into District 1? Because District 1 spreads way around and encroaches over in lots of my rural areas. So do we?
The answer is about 3,300. About 10,000 are coming out of District 2, and about 3,300 are being added to the other districts to bring them up all to the
So you just divide what we're taking out of her.
roughly. I mean, the number,
Hopefully.
those are not even numbers. They'll be
Yeah, I was
off
gonna
by a
say,
few,
yeah.
but yes, that's because the proposals before you have 4 equal districts. So we've had to reduce the size of District 2 and increase the size of the others. So the math is pretty straight.
I get that. I just didn't
Even,
do the
even I
math
can do
there.
it.
I saw you have your calculator out there. Good.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate the clarity on that. So thank you, Tom. This slide is also a review. This is the initial factors that we created the proposals with. It had the Secretary of State factors from a directive. The Board of Commissioners, this Board of Commissioners added 3 in the community from community engagement, added another 2. Next slide. At our last meeting, September 27th, what this board was asking for was a compare and contrast between proposals 4 and 5. What we're going to present in the next series of maps is one high-level map, which is what you're looking at there. And it has the current boundaries as compared to proposals 4 and 5. And then we're going to move into another set of maps for similarities. And then finally, a series of maps that are differences. With this, how to read this map is the gray line, the dark gray line is the current boundaries. The tan in the center of both 4 and 5 on this is going to be District 1. North of that is the green area, that's District 2. And the pink color there, salmon color, it's District 3, and the blue is District 4. This is high level of just proposals 4 and 5. Next slide, please. So this is kind of zoom in that I'm going to be able to talk about the similarities. The similarities of these, if we look at District 2, right in the center. If you go to the east, the county border, the similarity there between 4 and 5 is the Garden Home Whitford area. That's common between the two. On the southern border of District 1 is going to be the Barrows Road and Progress area. And if you notice up on, probably easier to see with Proposal 5, there's a cutout there just north of Sunset Highway. That is going to be the industrial area part of City of Hillsborough. It goes from Cornelius Pass Road through Brookwood and up to West Union Road. That is similar on both maps as well, but on Proposal 4, you don't see it as a cutout. It's just that whole area is not there for Proposal 4. The last similarity noted by PSU is along the Tualatin River. If you look at District 3, it's that kind of the jagged line there. That's the South Hillsborough area, and that's common between Proposal 4 and Proposal 5 as well. So next slide, please. This is a written form of those similarities that I just talked about on the map. Nothing different here. These are the 4 that I just described. So next slide, please.
Can you go back for 1 second? That road right there,
Yes,
which road is it
that's
again?
Cornelius Pass Road.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I was there. Thank you.
Thank you. What you're going to see with this map, we're going to be able to talk about the differences. And in this, the red area in the middle, that's District 1. North of that is District 2 in blue. Green is going to be District 3, and that's the southern part of the county. And the large area in purple is District 4. What you see scattered throughout this is those diagonal light colored areas, the diagonal hash lines. Those are areas that change. They're different between Proposal 4 and Proposal 5. And we're going to cover each one of those in the following slides. Next slide, please. Okay, to start with, that's correct. To start with, let's talk about that area north of Sunset Highway. That's going to be the area from Jackson School Road to Cornelius Pass Road. And that has on the one side of that, the cutout area, I just described about City Hillsborough, the industrial area around West Union Road there. And if you notice also on the western side of that, it does not include North Plains, nor the expansion area of North Plains. So this area, what's going to happen with this is in Proposal 4, this area is in District 4. And in Proposal 5, it's in District 2. So one area of note is no matter what we do with this area, it does not affect North Plains or the expansion area.
Could I also make a note that not tall. This edge follows the state redistricting. So this is in the new Senate district. This part is in Senate district. Sheet, Catherine. 16, 18. So they based it off of the factors that we asked them to.
Thank you. And you're right, that border right there, that is the Jackson School Road area right there, that border. And it goes
to Moreland and Dorland, or Dorland and then Moreland.
And there was a question that I am prepared to answer as far as the population of this area. It's 1,660 population. I did an analysis of what would happen if it was changed in area in Plan 5. It would create a difference between District 2 and District 4 of close to 4,000 people. It created a population disparity.
Okay. Okie dokie. Much higher than my rule of thumb. Thank you.
So you're saying 4 versus 5 created that disparity?
No.
This area, the
Currently-
yellow area.
Currently, right now, Proposal 4 and 5, they're right on, really close, almost right on the money for hitting 150,000 is the target. Okay, if in Proposal 5, this area that's highlighted in yellow was to move to District 4, that's where the disparity would occur. Only within Proposal 5 by moving it. Okay.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Now, this is the next area in yellow. That's the area, I guess it's just west of Gaston Road. It goes to the southern county border. Just north of that, on the north side, is going to be the Tualatin Valley River. A lot of the locals know the area on the east side is going to be Fern Hill, Spring Hill, and Iowa Hill. In Proposal 4, this is in District 4, and in Proposal 5, it's in District 3. Next slide. This is the Beaverton Light Rail Corridor. And on one side of it is going to be, on the south side is going to be the Beaverton Hillsdale Highway. And the north side is going to be the Canyon Road area. I need to note a discrepancy in the next couple lines. It says in Proposal 4, this is in district, and it should read 2. So the 1s and 2s are got reversed on this. So in Proposal 4, this is in District 2. And then in Proposal 5, this is in District 1.
The slides are different than that.
The online is correct then.
The online, okay. It has
This one says District 2 and District
Yeah.
1.
Okay.
Oh, this is right. The online is wrong. Okay, so this one's been corrected.
Okay.
Wait, can you
Very
say
good.
that again?
Yeah.
The one we're looking at here is correct or not correct?
Correct.
Okay. Very good. I didn't know if it was corrected at this point, but we wanted to make sure it was on the record.
So one we're
Correct.
looking at.
And
here.
it looks like they beat us to it.
But what you said was not consistent with it being correct. So could you, let's just go over it one more time.
One more time. In Proposal 4, this area in yellow, the Beaverton Light Rail Corridor, is in District 1. That is correct. And in Proposal 5, this area is in District 2.
So
Nice,
this,
we have a switch.
right, the slide we're showing has been corrected. The one you're looking at online. It's opposite.
I didn't realize that they had fixed it already. So thank you. Sorry about the
No, it's okay. We're just trying to make sure we got it. So clean line. In 5.
Okay, good. The area in yellow here, this is going to be the Farmington Road area, Cooper Mountain. It contains Riggs Road, Rosedale, Baker Rock, and Jenkins Estate. In Proposal 4, this is in District 1. In Proposal 5, This is in District 3. Next slide. This is the area surrounding the Aloha Intel campus. It's between 209th and 198th, and it goes south to Ravenwood Street. In Proposal 4, it is in District 3. In Proposal 5, it is in District 1. Next slide. This is the northeast Aloha area, 170th to 185th, and from Tualatin Valley Highway north to the light rail. This is in Proposal 4. Sorry, in Proposal 4, this is in District 1. In Proposal 5, this is in District 2. Next slide, please. This is the northwest part of Aloha. South border is Tualatin Valley Highway, north to Baseline, and it runs from Cornelius Pass Road to 198th. In Proposal 4, this is in District 4. In Proposal 5, this is in District 1. Okay, this wedge-shaped area runs from Baseline to the light rail, and on the western side, it's the Cornelius Pass Road. In Proposal 4, this is in District 2, and Proposal 5, this is in District 1. Next slide, please. This is the Tannisbourne and Amber Glen area. It's north of the light rail and runs up north to the Sunset Highway. It's runs to the west side, it's Cornelius Pass Road, and on the east, 185th. In Proposal 4, it is in District 2, and Proposal 5, it's in District 4. Next slide, please. And the last area that's different between Proposal 4 and 5 is this area. It's the Jackson Bottom Wetlands, includes Arbor Roses, and heads east to Minter Bridge Road. In Proposal 4, this is in District 4, and in Proposal 5, this is in District 3. Next slide, please. This is a repeat slide, but it helps you kind of look at what we just talked about, the differences between the two, and you're able to kind of envision the similarities and differences throughout this whole area. So next slide. And with that, I can turn it over to Tom Kerr.
Thank you. So today, you're receiving the final report of Portland State University. I know that our question said that you had to accept it. This is not a formal board action. The charter only requires that we provide it. It doesn't require that you take any action. But if you don't like it, obviously we're staff and we'll take direction to bring it back and do something different. But so when we say receive or accept, we're not using those informal board action terms. So we've scheduled for November 1st, first reading of the ordinance. So our goal today is to have you tell us which of the two proposals, 4 or 5, to include in that ordinance. So that would be first reading on November 1st, and then second reading would be November 29th, which is there are only 2 board regular meetings in the state in the month of November. So that's why they're separated by a full month. The new boundaries would then become effective December 29th, 2022. And then in the winter of 2023, one of the most important parts of this that I didn't mention when I talked about the deadline was the elections division has to do a lot of work to get ready for the next election by creating new boundaries for many of the precincts in the county. So they need a lot of lead time before the election to make sure they have that absolutely right for the voters to know where they're going to vote.
But you recommend clarifying question?
Yes.
It seems to me that the proposals that you put together tried to take advantage of legislative districts per the criteria, hence using those the new precinct numbers.
I don't know that was, I don't remember that being part of the criteria that we gave to you.
It may have just worked out that way.
Okay.
And yes, many of the precincts will be the same, but still we have to check every single one to make sure that they're right.
Absolutely.
Next slide, please, Maureen. So one question, do you accept the final report? And that is, do you give us direction that you don't want that report? And the big question, which one of the proposals would you like us to include as in the ordinance that we're proposing for first reading on November 1st?
So
Go ahead.
first, I just want to share information. I asked for input yesterday in the monthly chair mayors meeting. We'd previously made sure that they had, Daniel helped me make sure they knew what our process was, what we were doing for public engagement, and what proposals were on the table. So yesterday I asked them, okay, we have proposals 4 and 5 before us. What are the comments? So there were multiple mayors who said, you know, we don't really have a dog in fight, so to speak. I did check, Mayor Callaway was there, Mayor Truax was there, Mayor Lenahan was there. Mayor Lenahan expressed concern, which I'll get to in a minute. Mayor Beatty was not at the meeting, so I checked with her individually, and she looked at both proposals 4 and 5 and is fully aware of how Beaverton is currently present in both district boundaries. But as we talked about previously, it utilizes the urban planning area agreements, but makes a nice clear line in proposal 5 that helps with the constituent communication, which district are they in? So that was her input to us, informal input to us. With regard to Mayor Lenahan and North Plains, could we show slide 8? Or this one, it doesn't matter.
This one?
No, I just need that yellow box.
Oh,
To go away.
There we go. I need to be able to see that
Yeah.
hatch mark up
Okay.
there. Okay, so the current District 2 line goes out to Jackson School, Dorland and Moreland. That little notch up there that goes to the west. Are you with me?
Yep.
Okay. So I looked on our elections webpage to the new redistricting maps. In over that away, west of the hatch marks is, be tall, Catherine. This is in the Senate district. 8,
16.
thank you. And this is in 18. So that is taking advantage. Plan 5 is taking advantage of your current district boundary and those other political boundaries,
Plan 5.
right? Her concern is that
Hers being Mayor Lenahan.
Mayor Lenahan concern around that community of that westerly portion of the hatch mark. But for lack of better boundary, all the way to Cornelius Pass Road. She was saying that, well, this area makes more sense with affinity towards Beaverton, Bethany. But she was concerned and preferred Plan 4, which has this in District 4, because of the legislative changes that they've gone through with being part of a Senate district over with Columbia County, so on and so forth. But in looking at the state legislative maps, this Plan 5 continues to follow the state legislative maps. So her concern about that change doesn't seem to apply to those folks versus other surrounding area folks that are affected by the Senate district changes with Columbia County. But I just wanted to make sure that I gave you a heads up that she preferred Plan 4 over Plan 5 because of her viewpoint of people in that area. Does that match with what you heard last night, Commissioner Willie?
Yes, that she prefers Plan 4, and I believe that I do too, for two reasons. One is, as she stated, but the other one is in Plan 5. It appears that District 1 stretches clear over and consumes a portion of Gaston. So you'd be putting Little Gaston in two districts, which seems kind of inconsistent.
District 1? Wait a minute.
District 1 and see, if you look at proposal number 5 and you expand it open a lot, you'll see it reaches out and touches, it looks like touches Gaston and swings up towards.
District 3.
Not District 1.
Yeah, I was like, how did I get?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, District 3.
Do you want me to?
I was thinking Roy's district.
Okay.
No, it's right here. He's talking about this
Okay.
area.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
talking
yeah.
about that area right there.
Yeah,
Sorry. Nafisa, I didn't mean to
I
expand.
was like, how did District 1 get all the way?
No, I don't want to represent it, but there was for the District 4 adjustments, doing some consolidation around for the city of Hillsborough, and the fact that District 4 needs to help reduce the size of District 2, and District 3 needs to get bigger for the other adjustments made here. And so that's how District 3 swung over. Do you by any chance know how many residents are in that area?
Not at this time.
Yeah.
Can't be a lot, but no, I guess, so can we, at this point in time, can we redraw some of these lines? And do we have to go back and start over again? Is that what you're telling us, Tom?
Redrawing would delay. So if you redraw the lines, we have to get PSU to make sure they balance out. So that's an effort that takes usually a week or two. And we don't have that much time, but I mean, you're the commission, you can direct us. And as I said, the January 6th deadline is a matter of courtesy. It's not required by state law. You can go by it. And so it's your comfort level is really what's most important here.
I'd much prefer we get it right rather than.
Before we,
be on
I have
the-
some
the
questions
rush.
before we talk about redrawing lines.
So I'm just
you'll give-
asking if we
yeah.
could, if
Yeah.
that was a possibility. If he said, nope, you can't take 4, take 5, you get it or leave it. So
Well, no and take forfeit would certainly be my preference, but you're the commission. You get to do what you want.
So I have a couple of questions. When I'm looking at this map, the two areas where or both maps next to each other, proposal 4 and 5. So I'm on page 9.
Slide 9 or slide?
It says page 9 on the bottom right.
slide 9.
This one. Oh,
Oh, that one.
It's the one right after 8.
right there.
That one.
Yeah.
Got
This
it.
one. So,
There's two of
so
them that are side by side. I'm with you.
there are a couple places where the lines are really all over the place. And this was brought up when the chair mentioned Mayor Beatty's response to wanting a smooth line.
These lines being all over the place.
Well, right,
Okay.
being,
Jagged.
and so my question is, first of all, what in District 4, is that District 4 in the northwestern part there does that line follow a river? Does it follow, what does that follow?
That's the Tualatin River there.
That's what I
She was
thought.
just-
Okay.
Yes.
So, but in
Good
Beaverton,
point.
what causes that?
That's that high density light rail corridor. And what they did in District 4, they were looking at community boundaries. So it's going to outline parks, school districts, that type of thing. So it takes a small change to make a big population change when you're in that light rail, high density area.
Okay, so my point here is that I understand a natural boundary being a river.
Mhm.
That makes sense to me, but it's difficult for me. I understand what you're saying in terms of getting the numbers correct. You move the line around, but if I'm a community member, that's pretty confusing to me to be in that type of situation there. So I just want to put that out on the table right now.
Your concern is this.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, I didn't really think about it when I was looking at these originally until the chair mentioned Lacey's preference for a straight line there. And I can understand that from a community perspective. So, and that doesn't even get into the state legislature districts. That's a separate issue altogether.
Yeah, that's a very good observation. When you're looking at one proposal 5, you're looking at cities, UPAAs, and in proposal 4, you're actually looking at the community items, which may not be as clean. If you're looking for clean lines, perhaps the cities and the EPAAs are more in line.
And I'm not saying that I'm looking for that. I'm just saying that I want to understand what our decision, how the decision is going to impact those communities and what the reaction might be there.
Well, you're hitting on why I prefer 5 over 4 with regard to that boundary. Having navigated jagged edges like that for 12 years in my prior role. And hearing the kind of questions.
And even the other somewhat jagged areas are not as kind of crazy as those are in proposal 4. So I think I am going to be leaning to proposal 5.
Well, so I guess I'm following with
Can we
Mayor.
hear from Commissioner
Okay.
Fry first?
Yep.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. I wasn't sure if there was a vote or I was just, I just had a comment. Yeah, I think 4. I wish we were looking at 1, but anyway, so we won't go back. Yeah, 4 and 5. I think the section of ALOA that gets dropped in proposal 5, the part that is between 170th and 185th. My understanding is that's about 20% of the total population in the ALOA.
I don't know those numbers, I'm sorry.
And that's, Brenda and I were like doing our homework here, and it sounds like that's 20% of the ALOA population. And I think one of the factor being, communities of common interest not being split was one of the factors that we agreed on. And then to see the ALOA community be split, I mean, both proposals here are, one is splitting 3 times versus 1 time. So for me, I prefer proposal 5, but I will venture something that Tom doesn't like and to say that I like to see that section added back in to ensure that community stays together, if that's possible.
I have no idea where you're referring. Here. Point. Please.
Okay.
Are you
Where's-
taller?
I am not sure if I'm taller, and I'm not,
Oh,
so.
yeah, she's taller than me.
Not that
I know
tall.
standing next to her.
170th. I think you have a better, yeah, there you go. They have a slide actually, so. There's this one,
piece.
yeah.
Can you move the yellow box?
Here, well, you did, oh, you did. That yellow. Can you move the yellow box or get us on a map that gives us more
Or you-
information so we can get aligned with streets?
Uh,
Oy, oy, oy. I'll look at my screen.
Which slide is that?
Yeah, back.
It's this one. Yeah,
The first one.
this one right here.
That's.
I don't know.
Keep going.
Just what's the box thing? What's the,
I think.
yeah,
I thought.
starts with what? Oh, okay, this is northeast, over between 170th and. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just-
Which slide to go.
That's what Brenda and I were hunting.
Oh, we wondered that.
You have to have neighborhood.
It's in the report. It's in the
Yeah.
report.
Oh,
It's in the report. All the numbers.
No.
Yeah, all the numbers are in the report.
Yeah, they're in the report. That's where we are calculating. It's a rough.
Slide without any
but
boxes, which is this.
We're not making it up. I'm good at homeworks.
So you're proposing.
Wait a sec, we
You-
can't have
you
just
can
a
use-
sub conversation in our public meeting?
So, there is a laser pointer on here if any of you,
No, you had it, Marnie.
no, but if you want to use it because you were trying to point.
You know,
things
and
out
you
here.
know what you're talking about. I'm trying to
Figure out which slide.
get some settling here.
So may I ask you what you were suggesting in that, since I don't now have this in front of me, are you suggesting that part be included in District 1 or?
Yeah,
So you, but that's proposal 4.
no,
Oh, is this the one that we're flip flopped or something?
this is the conversation to redraw.
We wanted it without the yellow box, Brent.
Yeah.
So,
If it's not possible. I
so
think-
the reason,
I prefer slide 5.
Now, the concern with
concern
that
I
one-
have on this one is there isn't, Aloha isn't a city. So keeping a like community is really talking about very loose boundaries. You know, Aloha is split in so many different ways already. And we know, well, I'm trying to not. I just trying to keep Aloha whole. There's no such thing. It's all perceived. There's a perception of community in an unincorporated area that has no community set development. It's all retained in various community members' minds. So,
So, I think we can do whatever your board directs us to do. We can ask PSU to do that. But our concern, we can tell just by looking, that's a very densely populated area. And so it's going to be a lot of people. And
Yeah,
that's
20%.
going to mean a lot of shifts in every other area. So it will be a relatively large change. You know,
so
in addition
solving
to
one
any other
problem but
apps.
creating others.
I mean, we can,
And is Beaverton's split too, correct?
Oh, yeah, it's split between two commissioner districts. Yeah.
I'm just pointing that out, that it's, that we kept Hillsborough whole. This,
No, Hillsborough is 3 districts.
is it 3? Okay, thank you.
But we provided more line clarity. I think.
Brenda tells me that that area has about 8,000 people.
Oh, geez, that's a big.
That's
delta
almost as
change.
much as how District 2 was over.
Yeah. 20%.
Yeah, geez. Originally, it was page 57 had really great chart for that. And I was testing the deviations. And once you get away from increasing by 270 people, your deviations are very significant. So that's why it was so impactful for me to hear that 400 number. Because I tried another deviation, another change of 500 people, right? Thinking about a generally rural area, how can there be more than 500 people there? Well, it's, you know, households and population are different. And that took the deviation out to 0.65%, which is huge. So, yeah.
So I'm still advocating that if North Plains also wants to be in all one district and it's 128 people is what I think I heard the mayor say last night. I don't know why we can't facilitate that. I realize we're gonna have to go back if we do that.
No, North Plains is still in one district.
No, North Plains got 128. That's what the mayor was saying to the north in district proposal 5.
So
North Plains has 128 people or something in District 2.
well, there's something that you and she see that I
Well-
don't currently follow yet.
This was never in.
No, she said that. I don't know what it
Is
is.
it
It's something up
potential
north
annex
of,
area?
it's something up north of, probably
report-
north of Pumpkin Ridge up there. It has to be because you kind of swing up there, it looks like. Because that's your current line too.
Yeah.
Proposal 5 is your
I've
current
never-
line. So I have
Places
not
go
gone
down
in and looked at exactly where that line is drawn and if that, but she said they're in their zip code and they're in their North Plains city.
They're not in their UGB.
I didn't, if it was North Plains, then it would not be in Metro either, right? And I've never known that any area, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying that there's a lot of factors that would go into making me know that it was in District 2 and
Well, your metro lines don't follow.
Well, you met this, yeah.
North Plains is
I,
not.
I
in
think
that.
we can put
No,
this to
sure.
bed. I have an expert in the room who can tell you, answer your question, Erin Wardell. She looked at this morning.
Erin Wardell, all right.
So staff can call its own expert up,
Yes, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that
just being clear.
Brenda said she talked to Erin this morning about this very issue.
It did come up. So I pulled North Plains planning maps, which show the existing boundary of North Plains, as well as their future UGB expansion areas under consideration. In either scenario, North Plains is all kept together. Jackson School Road is the boundary of North Plains.
Okay, all right, as long as we communicate that to the mayor, I'm fine with that then. Okay,
Sorry, Erin, and thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
so Erin, while you're there, you didn't know this because I didn't ask the question, but as you drop down into proposal 5, is the city of Gaston bifurcated between 2 different districts?
I did not look into the city of Gaston, so
I
I
think
would.
my concern, quite frankly, is that District 3 spreads so far west that if someone is living in Tualatin, they're really not going to represent that area of the county.
So Commissioner Willie, as I understand it, proposal 5 keeps all of Gaston in District 4.
What it looks like, it kind of wraps around it.
And the note I've got from Brenda is that there is some surrounding area that would move to District 3, but no part of the actual city itself.
Because that city, you know, is also in Yamhill County.
I did not know that.
About half of it is in Yamhill County.
Not population wise, it's not.
No.
Look,
And Commissioner Willie, I'd also take exception to, I think what I heard you say was if the commissioner lived in Tualatin, they wouldn't represent Gaston.
It'd be a hike for them.
Well, but if anybody has a hike and if anybody sees representation, you're there. So I
you're
don't
not
buy that. Sorry.
I'm just saying it's going to be a challenge, you know?
Commissioner staff is confirming Gaston, so I would suggest just moving on to other questions while we just work on the side on confirming that.
Okay.
Erin is confirming that Gaston is all kept together. Erin is confirming that Gaston is all kept together, the city.
In proposal 5.
has confirmed,
Has confirmed.
not confirming, has confirmed.
Gaston together.
That's good, because you know, all 300 of them want to be in the same box. Because I'm going there tomorrow night, I want to tell them.
Proposal 5.
On proposal 5 as well.
Where's Roy on this?
He's not here.
I
Commissioner
understand that.
5?
I'm on 5 and 5.
Really?
And Commissioner Willie, I believe he favored proposal 5 as well at the last meeting, but I could be mistaken. Because
Well, if I
think-
remember the
Not that it makes
discussion,
any
it
difference
was
'cause we got
about,
3 5s already.
it was about city and urban planning area agreement, and that was what his interest was to work, to be focused there. So I believe you're correct, Mr. Carr.
And Commissioner Willie, do you have direction?
Liked 4.
Are you in favor of 4? Okay, but I have 3 that say 5.
I know, so
Okay, just wanted to
it's
confirm.
familiar territory for me.
Commissioner Willie.
So getting the direction from the commission, we will bring back an ordinance on November 1st that incorporates proposal number 5.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And I assume that you have no challenges with the report, so we will consider it delivered to you as satisfying the charter.
And
Well,
thank you for
I
your
can
work.
confirm that you've provided it for us, if that's what you're looking for.
That's all.
Since that's all we have. to-
And when we thank folks, we should have thanked Brenda Bartlett. She has done an amazing job of keeping us all on track. And as you can see, she's
Yes.
running around the room and sending us information as we go. So she has been a tremendous part of this team. And I know that we mentioned her.
Thank you, Brenda.
I thought I did, but they,
Oh.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, it's time for a break before we continue on to our 2 remaining topics.
Oh, boy.
So, yep, we're behind schedule. We have a 15-minute break, so 3:15. See you back here.
Wow, we're an hour behind.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Okay, we're back. And we have two more topics left on our agenda for this afternoon. First, we have appointments to the Rural Road Operations and Maintenance Advisory Committee, RROMAC.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually just going to introduce Sherry McFall, our Community Program Coordinator, who staffs the RROMAC and the Urban Road Maintenance District Advisory Committee as well. So she's going to walk us through the proposed appointments, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you very much. We're here today to update you on two applicants for the Rural Road Operations and Maintenance Advisory Committee. These two applicants have already served as members. One has served, they've both served their full term and they're reapplying for second term. Both are very interested and engaging members of the committee. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, I'll just say I support both of these appointments. My question is, what do you think we need to do so that we can help younger adults see how serving on this committee provides them opportunities to learn and contribute? I mean, if you've got any high-tech knowledge at all or any curiosity about how things work, if you like understanding or learning about how systems work, this is a great committee for that. So
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do to promote it, but I'm all ears for bright ideas.
Yes, we definitely have struggled to generate interest in the community, and we're starting with a relatively smaller population pool by mostly seeking people that are in the rural areas, but we do have some urban residents as well on the committee that have either business or other interest in the rural area. So I think that's one of the things that we'll continue to work on. And I think, obviously we're through the Civic Leaders Program, trying to encourage more people to apply to all the various committees. So this is just it's a little bit of a tough one. And it's a larger committee for 12 members for what's really a relatively smaller proportion of the population. So that might also be something for us to be thinking about is, do we really need maybe 12 committee members since we're having a hard time filling all of those seats. So, but yeah, we should be continuing to think about how we can generate some additional interest for sure.
And from my perspective, you make it really easy to attend meetings.
Yes, that's right. And if we go back in person, we have donuts.
Actually, we have been in both in person and virtual. And at the last meeting, it was requested that we have donuts at the next meeting. So I think more of them are getting back into the in-person swing and happy to be there.
Well, and if the only way you can participate is virtually, I bet we can send you a $10 gift card to your favorite donut shop.
So what would you think about changing the name? Rural Roads is pretty boring. Okay, I mean, I get it. It's about rural roads.
What's your idea?
Those guys know, they don't know. It just occurred to me that,
The
you know,
Shazam.
if you don't live in, you don't live in rural, then you're thinking, this doesn't apply to me. I don't know. It's just a thought.
That's a good
Because you're right, we've kind of struggled with that. I mean, we got banks to get somebody to do that. And I'm going to Gaston tomorrow night, so I'll ask them to consider doing that as well.
Hey, if it makes it more attractive to say not metro area roads, who knows?
And we have reached out to different associations on the equity side of things to try to invite folks to join the committee. But you brought up a really good point about tech, and I haven't thought of that yet. So we'll look and see what we can find and who we can invite or encourage.
Yeah.
Because it's certainly not an invitation only.
Yeah.
Encourage anyone.
Cool. So is everybody ready to have that action come back to us? Terrific.
Great.
Good to
Thank
see
you very much.
you.
Good
Thank
to
you
see
so
you
much.
too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Stephen.
Yes.
Your team gets to stay with us here as we talk about the long-range planning work plan.
Indeed. And so I'm actually gonna maybe, oh,
Move over
yeah,
there?
maybe I'll move over there. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
I'm hearing I should stay on this side all the time. We talked about pulling
know.
in a square table, but that's for another day.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I really was just going to also introduce Teresa Cherniak, our Principal Planner for Community Planning, and Aaron Wardell, our Interim Planning and Development Services Manager. What we want to walk through today is just a status report on our current long-range planning work program, which your board adopted in 2021. And we've had several discussions. I think, you know, there's quite a bit of ongoing work from that adopted program that we're continuing with. And we have a few new things that we need to work on. So we want to just give you all an update on that, seek your direction to come back with essentially amendments to the existing work program to carry forward some additional tasks. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Stephen, and good to see all of you. So good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. It's been a while since we've been here to talk about the long range planning work program. Typically we'd be here in the spring, but this past year was quite unusual with the pandemic and a number of state mandated items and short timeframes and legal challenges. And so this is kind of the first chance we're having to catch our breath a little bit and to come back with a status report on everything that has been happening on the work with our work program, and talk about some of the things that have been coming up that are mandated that we will be needing to add to that. So the purpose today is to give you that status report, to talk about the potential addition of some new mandatory tasks, and to request that you provide us direction to come back with an action item with our updated work program, adding those mandated tasks, and then give us direction to start on a 2-year work program that we would start early next year. And then that would be kind of in our usual way that we do things, where it would go out to the public as a draft and we would get comments and feedback and add items at that time. So a little bit of a refresher, long-range planning is community planning and transportation planning. We have about 27 full-time equivalent staff, including planners, geographic systems analysts, administrative staff, and management. We're responsible for maintaining and updating the comprehensive plan, and that includes these different documents here, including the community development code. Those do need changes over time to respond to changes in state law, changing needs, and different issues that arise. Our work is longer term and bigger picture than the current planning work, which looks at development proposals. And we work with the local cities as well as regionally at the state and federal level. Since there are typically a lot more tasks on our work program or being requested than we can actually do, we do this work program to make sure that the board knows the different things that we're tasked with and that we're doing the work that's the board's priority and that supports your policy direction. The work program identifies all the tasks we'll be working on, typically over the next year, but increasingly it's been over a couple years. That includes ordinances, studies, special projects, and other types of work. There are a number of factors that drive the work of long-range planning, including board and CAO and community requests, requirements to meet state law and rules, the metro requirements, and the coordination that we do with regional and state partners.
Work is organized by order of priority. So tier 1 is the highest priority, the major projects. And usually we really only have time to work on the tier 1 tasks. We do have a tier 2 and a tier 3 for those maybe things that we want to make sure we don't lose sight of, but that we probably don't have time in the current year to do. If you look at our work program table, and we did include that as a link to this briefing memo for this work session, you'll see that more than 50% of our staff time is spent on ongoing tasks, many of which are mandated and provide the foundation for the work that we do. So that includes everything from plan amendments and annexations to the transportation modeling and GIS mapping, some of the transportation tasks that are on here, as well as staffing the Planning Commission and the WCCC. So that's a pretty large body of work. And then ongoing work with our local, regional, state, and federal partners. So we do a lot of work that the specific projects may vary, but the body of work is always there to be doing that coordination. So city planning for new urban areas. There's always something at Metro right now. There's a regional transportation plan update, urban planning area agreements. So there's again, projects vary, but the work is always there. This next series of slides summarize the status of the remaining work that we have in our tier 1. This first slide is the completed and substantially completed projects. The first one was ordinance number 865 to address the new urban growth boundary areas. That one, you'll recall, was continued a couple times due to a request from the state to wait until all appeals were completed. So that one did get adopted this year. And the other big accomplishment was our House Bill 2001 middle housing related ordinances. There were 2 of those ordinances to get all of the middle housing code changes into our community development code. That there is still one ordinance coming forward, and you'll hear that in December. That'll be for middle housing land divisions. And what that does is provide an expedited land division process for middle housing developments. So that's kind of the 3 parts of the middle housing work. We are still working with current planning on implementing the new rules and regulations that were adopted. So that's a big part of our work as well. As far as partially completed tasks, you'll see there's a substantial body of work underway. Most of this wasn't expected to be completed in 1 year. So a lot of our work is multi-year. It's however long some of these things need to take is how long they take. And so things like our significant natural resources follow-up work, that is one where our regulations were sent back to us by the Land Use Board of Appeals. And so we do need to do additional work on that. You'll be seeing some of that this year. We do have a request for proposals out for a consultant to help us on that work. So we are moving forward with that. On the transportation system plan updates, there was the general update that was approved by ordinance 881 earlier this year. And then 882, the Tile Flat Road ordinance, is going to come back to the board in January. And this morning, then the board did reject the other ordinance, the Cornelius Pass Road.
Can I take a question?
Uh-huh.
How much time, how many hours do you spend on one of those ordinances?
We typically, in the work program table, budget half an FTE, half a full-time equivalent staff person for a typical ordinance. And
What's a half? So
a half a person over a full year.
oh,
But that would
well,
be,
that's 1,000 hours.
yeah, give or take. Mhm. And so that would include Aaron's time, my time, the staff person's time, any mapping or GIS time or administrative staff, the time it takes
before the planning commission and writing staff reports and all of that. But that's,
Can we
Mhm.
go through the presentation and come back to questions?
Wanted to point that out, Chair, is all. Thank you.
and yeah, so the table that is always in the work program does have a column there for staff time. So you can always take a look at what we were thinking any one thing would take. Back to this short-term rental license regulations, that is well underway, and we expect to be bringing that forward to the board as an ordinance this winter. Minor comprehensive plan amendments, there was one ordinance adopted on rural changes. And we do have another that's at the Planning Commission tomorrow night, actually, and you'll be seeing that in November. That folds in some housekeeping items as well as minor amendments primarily focused on the urban area. So the one that passed already was rural. This one will be a little bit more urban. And then this slide focuses on the transportation tasks. So I'll turn that over to Erin.
So we have a number of partially completed tasks being conducted by the transportation planning team right now. The first on the list here is our complete streets design update. The board has seen this item in previous work sessions. We are waiting on our engineering staff to finish the update to our county road design and construction standards. So we expect that to come forward to the board sometime next year. On trails planning and coordination, there is a lot of ongoing work on trails. One of the big things we're working on right now is the Council Creek Regional Trail design work. We had our executive elected official steering committee yesterday. We also work on other trails projects with THPRD, Salmonberry Trails, another that we're coordinating on. We have recently kicked off our countywide transit study in coordination with several of the cities within Washington County. So that will be approximately an 18-month planning effort. Our major street transportation improvement program funding allocation is of course ongoing, looking to wrap that up in the first quarter of next year. In addition to the countywide transit study, we also do ongoing countywide transit work around the HB 2017 transit funds that the county receives. We have to allocate that funding out. So we've been working on developing our TDP. And then finally, we had a task to use to develop a racial equity lens. And this is some work that we were able to initiate through our MISDIP 2328 funding allocation and HB 2001 work, where we work to develop an equity framework and our equity index. And so we're still looking for ways to fully implement that and operationalize it in more of our planning studies. So that is why that work is still ongoing. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks. Work on a few tasks has been delayed. So on these two, the housing development data collection and assessment, we have just started working on that. There is a state committee on the regional housing needs analyses. And so we're trying to coordinate with some of the work that's being done there. And finally, we had planned to do an issue paper on the Raleigh Hills Town Center area. We've delayed that because of something we'll talk about in a moment, the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking. We ended up doing spending a lot more time on that than we had expected. And there are implications for this town center and the town center planning that are coming out of that rulemaking. So we thought we'd better hold back on that until we know more about what's going to be required. So the couple things, we have a list actually of 6 items that have come up over the year that we're perceiving to be required or important things that we do work on. The first is that climate friendly and equitable communities implementation, or you'll hear of CFEC, and I know you've had a briefing or two on that. This was state rulemaking that actually requires us to do a lot of work at the local level. It'll start out with some changes to our parking requirements, but then we will have to do some additional town center planning and some other changes to our transportation and land use systems. Some of that is still being sorted out. There is a lawsuit underway. And so it'll probably play out over the next couple of years, but we know that it's expected to be a significant amount of work.
Parking changes will probably be the first thing that the board might see on that. With North Plains, they are working on an expansion to their urban growth boundary. And what that means is that we will need to actually update our urban planning area agreement as well as our plan. And we didn't have that in our current work program. But as that work progresses, we'll need to take that forward and bring that forward to the board as an ordinance. On significant natural resources, we anticipated some work. We knew that we had a remand, but we have recently had one of our current planning approvals is being challenged at the Land Use Board of Appeals. And there's also the possibility of another enforcement order. And I believe County Council may have briefed the board on some of that. So our staff does work on helping support council on that. And depending on what comes out of those, we may well have some additional work. On psilocybin time, place, and manner regulations, the board did decide not to place a ballot measure on the ballot to opt out of allowing psilocybin businesses once they're allowed by the state in January. The state rulemaking, though, is still underway, and depending on what comes out of that in terms of regulations and what it says we can and can't do, we may want to come back with some land use regulations that lets people know what they can do, lets the public know what they can do, and just provides some clarity there. On the county climate action plan, we know the board's very interested in this and is planning another discussion in November. So we have some minor level of work in our staff work program. But depending on what the board's direction is going forward, there could be additional work for our staff. And then while we already have some regional and interagency coordination in our work program, there are a couple additional items that we thought were big enough that we probably should put them on individually. That's the Tualatin Valley Highway Hope Grant funded work and the West Side Multimodal Improvement Study. Finally, well, in typical years, we will solicit new requests from the public and others. We didn't do that this year. However, we do receive requests throughout the year. And so we take those in. We have a file with all of those. This is the list that we have so far. And we do have a little bit more detail in the staff report. Some of these are from the Committee for Community Involvement. Some are from individual CPOs. Some are from just general public. So it's a pretty wide range of types of tasks or types of requests. Typically, when we do a work program, we analyze all of those and give a recommendation. But as you can see from this presentation, there's a lot of work that staff is still in the middle of, and some new mandatory tasks that could be a significant amount of work. So as we look at the tasks in the work program and the new mandated tasks, we believe the result is a pretty full plate for the rest of this fiscal year. And we don't believe at this time that new tasks really can be added. So the questions that we're asking the board today are whether you're comfortable with providing us direction to return with an action item. It probably would be, since I believe a couple of meetings are not happening in November, so it'll probably be at the end of November. We would bring forward a revised work program table that adds the mandated tasks that we listed in here and authorizes us to file ordinances on those as needed, and then direct us to start working on a 2-year work program for the coming 2 fiscal years. So that would be 23, 24, and 24, 25. And what we would do is as we start that work, we would do the analysis of the requests that we've gotten so far. We would send it out and ask people for any further feedback or any other ideas. We would analyze those and package all of that and bring that forward kind of as our our typical process, where we would bring a draft to the board, get board input, and then bring a final. So with that, that's our final slide. And we'd be happy to answer any questions as you have.
Commissioner Willie, you were starting. Do you want to do any other questions at this point?
Yeah, so I guess this is the list of potential, but this is not recommendations. Is that, I'm not seeing a list here.
These ones from the public are they're not, these aren't the ones that are recommended for inclusion right now. The ones that are recommended are these ones that we see more as mandated ones. So the 6, the CFAC, the North Plains, additional significant natural resources work, potentially the psilocybin county climate action plan, and new regional and interagency coordination. So these other ones we would bring back as part of the work program, the next work program, which actually will start early next year. So it's not that far away, really.
Well, so I guess I'm looking at the partially completed task list. Those are not going to be completed by December 31, right? So we're going to roll into next year. So
we're keeping working on them.
Is that kind of normal that we don't anticipate the list in January to be done by December? There's always a roll ahead on those. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty normal. Many of our projects take several years to complete.
Yeah. Okay.
I think part of the reason that we've done an annual work program was when we had the ordinance season, we needed the board's direction on which ordinances to file that year in that season. And so with moving away from that, there's a little less of a need for that. But we know that each year that updates are needed, but a lot of our work is ongoing or takes multi-year or ongoing.
I just looking at that tectonics development agreement work that's not going to make the cut this year, but if that would bubble to the surface, that'd be a pretty significant project, wouldn't it?
On that one, Tektronix. How much can we say? What should we say? We did an update.
Okay, maybe
As
I'd
it
say
says
that-
in the memo,
I'll
if
retract the
needed,
question.
if needed, would be an ordinance. Other work might be delayed as a result.
Yeah.
Page 7 of 9.
We haven't been asked at this point to do an update of that, but there's other work going on with Tektronix that potentially could make that needed.
Okay. I'm done.
And since I've referred to it, the staff memo was quite good for giving further information on each of these summarized bullet items. Commissioners Fye or Treese, do you have any questions or comments?
I just want to know how we get more hours in the day, right? So, this is, I fully respect this recommendation saying we need to get these things done, and we need to limit how, what we take on, and with, certainly with looking clearly with clear eyes at everything that is requested. So thank you.
Thank you as well. I don't have any questions for you other than to say I appreciate you listing the gas station third bullet, because that was a constituent conversations that we've had, and I think long range planning during that time frame was mentioned, and I appreciate that it reflects here.
So I'll say on your staff report on page 4 of 9 on S 1.8, I just want to put a plug in for ensuring that safety is included in that work that's underway. Just seems like it got lost in that. So
Yes.
I just
going
I'm
forward.
gonna keep putting a plug in for safety and all that we do when it comes to transportation especially.
It is the origin of that work as well, so we want to make sure that's emphasized.
And just to ensure that folks know, on page 3 of 9, on S 1.7 under completed tasks, Metro does not have to adopt their next urban growth report until the end of 2024. And they have up to a year to make any subsequent UGB decisions. So that means out in 2025. So at least we do have a little bit of bandwidth there, setting aside what may happen with the UGB exchange process. Who knows there? I won't opine on the new requests at this juncture because it isn't necessary. I did not print for myself the detailed sheets, so while I looked at them Friday, I may find that if I was to look back at them. But part of what in this age of budget difficulties that we have and a need to be really more conscientious, I'll say, in using countywide this is all my opinion, countywide resources for countywide benefit. I am more than ever sensitized to work that is, and distinguishing work that is UUA only, UUA and rural, which I recognize some of these are, and those that are countywide, such as referring to our role in the countywide transportation network. So just looking ahead, not for the annual work plan you're doing now, but because I don't want to create more work for you. Looking ahead in the future, that's definitely something that I will be looking for.
And we do, so it'll be this table essentially that we'll bring forward for approval. It'll be probably a consent item. And that does have the area at the end, and it talks about exactly what you're, the areas you were talking about.
Terrific. Yeah. Terrific. Just because looking at all of the mandated things that are coming in and being very sensitive to how much we're being asked to do without the resources that are needed. I think that clarity will help me at least for future potential direction. So thank you. Keep up the great work.
All right, thank you so much.
All righty, that brings us to the end of today's work session agenda. Are there any other board or leadership items to bring up for today?
Sure, I do have one of note. Around midday, I'll say I sent the board an email briefing on 24/7, 365 critical facility needs. So this includes the jail, Harkins House, community corrections. I would suggest review of that memo prior to your board jail tour on the 25th of this month. I want to highlight this only includes those 3 facilities. We have significant needs across the rest of Washington County portfolio. That won't be part of that discussion, nor is it part of this memo, but that is part of the work that facilities is doing in conjunction with ITS and transportation to produce a first look at Washington County capital improvement plan, which is scheduled for December. So just want to highlight what this memo is and what this is not. If you would like a further briefing to discuss the projects that are outlined in that memo prior to the jail tour, feel free to reach out and we can get that scheduled. Laurel Brown, who I don't know if Laurel has presented to your board yet. She is our facility and parks manager. She will be helping lead a portion of the tour to walk through the current maintenance needs within our jail.
So the tour is next Tuesday.
On the 25th, the morning of the 25th.
before our work session.
Correct. And lunch will be provided.
Your team's doing awesome work. They've been cranking out the information memos and I've been trying to take it all in. Phew. Anything else? Nope. Okay,
Long day, long day.
we are hereby adjourned.